What's up, people? How we doing today? We did a little of a surprise live stream. I know it wasn't planned too far in advance, but I figured we'd do something on Wednesday. And we have with us Hasbro's own former Hasbro lead designer of Transformers, and the list goes on and on for all the hats that he wore throughout those decades. We have Aaron Archer with us.
Hello, hello.
If we have
Happy Wednesday.
Yeah. If we have any, if our audio isn't that great, guys, just let us know, and we're still trying to figure out everything on this end. Aaron doesn't have a camera on this time, so you could just look at a pretty picture of him with the angry archer. So
The last of your analog old school.
yeah. So we're going to talk about a bunch of stuff today. We're going to talk about stolen toys. I figured it was going to be a topic that was going to be coming up in the future. And so pretty much, Aaron, he has a little of a bit of experience with that. He knows a little bit of the history of it, being on that side and everything that's going on in the world of toys and all the stuff that got snatched throughout the year. So let us know what was happening back in the day with the stolen toys, Transformers or otherwise.
Well, it's interesting, right? As the hobby has grown, the whole interest in any of this stuff has grown, right? These things used to just be not that desirable. Everything got thrown away.
Mm-hmm.
And as the hobby has grown, then there has been over the last, I would say 25, 30 years, right, more interest in things or even understanding of things like first shots or prototypes or urethanes or, any of these things that we now all know now is like just part of being in the hobby.
Well, anything of historical value, especially.
Yeah, and treating it with historical value is a relatively new thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? These, I mean, we're not so far off from just gross commercial, get this in, out, done, not sentimental at all. And so there's over the years, a bigger and bigger opportunity then that is going to naturally occur where there's money to be made. Those things have some value to somebody,
Totally.
whether it's currency in the fact that can be turned into literal money or just internet currency. I got the photos first. I got the sample first. I've literally seen people over the years find themselves in any number of situations related to prototypes and samples and that kind of stuff on the Hasbro side of it, not the fan side of it. And it's always very interesting how that can go because for some goofy colored plastic, you can really lose your status in the company, if not your job.
Mm-hmm.
But what we're talking about a little bit than the stolen toys. It used to be a novelty, right? So if I started in the mid 90s, if something got out that was a crazy colored first shot, that's what it felt like. It was a real novelty. Like, look at this, I got a pink and yellow Batman. To this day, I have a bright yellow animated Batmobile. And it's really one of my prized possessions. I got it the first week I started at Kenner, and it was just so goofy and cool that it just...
And today, because of that market that you're referring to, would be worth probably a fortune to a small community of people.
I guess so.
Oh, totally.
But
totally.
I got it out of a box that was sitting in the back of a closet. So to me, it has more sentimental value, right? Of learning the trade and what was going on. So yeah, but I hear you. Absolutely. And so, like I said, it was novel. It was like, oh, look, this guy gave me this thing, or these things showed up at a convention or whatever. They're weird colors, or they don't have their weapons, or it's a toy line that never got their third wave put out, and this was what it was. And then that started changing as the internet changed, because the old mediums, you had to wait months to get a magazine. Somebody had to get photos of something and put it in a magazine, and have that magazine printed and shipped and all that. So it took a while. There wasn't the endless demand, or the as fast of demand for the turnover of new stuff. And look what we found. But once the internet started, once you got the Rebel Scum in Star Wars world and some of these other bigger platforms for these bigger brands, humbly bigger than Transformers in a lot of cases, there was a huge then appetite for, we got to be first. We got to have new. We got to have interesting stuff to talk about, and novel things to display. So that started hey, I know a guy that works there. Maybe he can Oh, I know what factory they use, or let's find the factory they use, ... I know a dock worker somewhere. I know a guy that brings in the shipments from the warehouse at Target, Walmart, Toys R Us, you name it. There's a lot of
connections.
For an enterprising person over the years, I've seen a lot of those connections at different points, right? And you see it all the way down to who's opening the boxes. If you can get that guy in the back of the store to open up the boxes, you'll get the one per case guy quicker than and think of that chain working all the way back up to the factory floor somewhere. So what started happening in the Star Wars world, where I would say for me, this kind of
this craziness started.
Yeah, where it started to become more than just a weird, hey, we gotta make sure that we don't let this stuff out, or it's not safe to let this stuff out. But it would pop up anyway. It's like, oh, there's something happening. It was definitely around Star Wars, and that's when you started seeing them stamping numbers and stuff on foreheads or colors. Sometimes they would cut the faces off of figures, which was really annoying, because we'd get those figures to have samples made, to review samples for deco. And if you don't have a face, you can't review the deco. Anyway, so they started to combat it that way. I'm not going to give all the tricks of the trade, obviously, here, but that just started if I have access to samples, then my site or web page back in the day, is going to get more traffic, and it just starts an escalation a little bit. You have any questions about any of that?
Well, to give an example, like when you mentioned Rebel Scum, especially like you were with Kenner at the time during episode 1, and
sure.
And back then, I use this term with Transformers a lot, especially because Transformers usually we see toys before any kind of fiction hits with anything. I use the term toy spoilers, which is with something like Star Wars, toys come out sometimes 1 month, maybe 2 months before the movie does, and you be getting spoilers of anything of the movie. Hey, what's this Sebulba figure? Like, what is the story with this? And if it leaks out from the factory 4 months, 5 months in advance, for a Rebel Scum to get like, hey, we got this leaked figure, alien figure, that's riding in this weird pod looking thing, and this is all we got. And you're talking, oh, we're a year and a half out from the movie hitting theaters, and I think it was May 27th, 99, something like that. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But the point is that they would they would use that as a way to garner traffic. And again, when you understand the weeds of how websites work with advertising and clicking and all of that, there's a monetary gain to be there. Not just to be the hippest kid on the block verbally, but to also there could be a monetary gain of getting that test shot stolen.
Absolutely.
And then making
Sure.
it to a website.
Absolutely.
And that's all the way back in 99, you know, before the turn of the century.
So you're really pivoting me to the next phase of the world we're living in. So that was the innocent phase, so to speak. Some enterprising people were just trying to be first. And then we get into an arms race. So toys also used to be fast plastic, you know, summer movies, you know, new shows, and it's become something different over the years. And the license holders care, like you said, particularly Star Wars, a lot more about the release of the information. And having random plastic photos of half-painted, half-put together, wrongly put together things could be a big distraction to them. So that started the era of tightening up at the factories. The license holders, I'm not going to pick on any one tonight, demand that their things are protected. We sign a Hasbro or Mattel or any of the companies signed contracts to keep the material proprietary, and you know it's not yours to release until the license holder wants it released. So that meant that we would have to get stronger with the factories and our partners about how to maintain all the information. So you would use coded lists for the rollout with numbers rather than names, so that you wouldn't leak these names 5 months in advance on some Walmart computer, subalbita, you know.
Just to cut you off, Hasbro even in recent has done that. When Studio Series first was kind of hitting the early like Walmart computers, they were being cute and they were naming all the characters after Seinfeld characters, and it would be like Transformers Studio Series Kramer, and people would be like, "What is going on? Uncle Leo?" You know, so. Yeah, so it was but they stopped doing that. But what I think it was when Studio Series was first getting germinated, I think they really wanted to protect it. It's also because it was related to the movies and stuff, so I think there was an extra layer of carefulness with it.
Well, I'll tell you, on episode 1, it was just a real pain in the butt because you're using fake names for all this stuff and fake numbers throughout the whole process, and it's just very tough to talk about, you know, Jar Jar when you're referencing, you know, some number all the time.
Well, also, I can only imagine.
We're natural process is just to want to use names and, you know, have clarity. Did you have a question there?
Oh, no, I was just going to say how, like, you know, not to mention, I mean, episode 1, regardless of what people think in hindsight, was a big deal back then. You know, it was the next coming in a lot of ways. So I could only imagine how, you know, maddening it must have been back then.
Yeah, it was something else. A discussion on its own.
Yeah, I could only imagine.
So what that then means is that Hasbro has to go over to what traditionally has been, you know, pretty basic Chinese, Japanese, and now Vietnamese manufacturing process, plastic design process, and which is a very dirty and cheap kind of way to make stuff. It doesn't have to be dirty, but at different points it has been. Mm-hmm. And now you're asking these guys to have better security, care about day and dates of releases and things. You know, tighten up the maybe even the mentality within the factory workforce of how you make extra money off to the side by not letting things walk out the side of a warehouse or a box leave, making more processes about custodial chain of custody of pallets and things like that. Maybe add cameras to the factory to watch finished goods. All these things. These one could call them a burden. One could call it heightened security. One could call it proper protocols. Just adds a burden to the factory. Adds more costs to the factory that they have to then incur. Making these extra spaces for holding goods, and all of those kinds of things. That now
and
helps.
labor too.
A lot of labor.
Putting cameras is one thing. Who's watching those cameras? So.
Yeah, all that's Well, exactly, and it's a slippery slope. Because a lot of it could be just lip service, but they incur all these extra costs, and over the few years or more years, they got to get that money back. And at the same time, the world is shifting away from plastic manufacturing into technological manufacturing is the place to be if you can be as a factory owner.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at all these little action figures and things is not. And now you want me to spend more money to maintain these little plastic bits of things? Like, that's not the currency, in Japan, or I keep saying Japan, but in China, they don't, they're not sentimental about these little trinkets. So it's very hard to then maintain that wall, or you're spending a lot of money to maintain that wall, and it's always not perfect anyway. So now you have factories who are tired of spending extra money looking for that technological manufacturing if they can get it. And the costs going up. Well, let's move it further out. Let's move manufacturing to Vietnam. Well, now there's no protocols, and now there's all the new processes that need to be put in place. And, the skimming off the top which is done in every industry, no matter what it is, it seems, has to be rooted out and explained why it's bad and not why we don't do that, and encourage people with other monetary or what to not do that. It just makes it incredibly hard because again, you have a movie to protect and a launch and a day and date, but it's being compromised by a little piece of plastic on the other side of the world.
Yep.
It's a very interesting problem. And then there's different people along the way who can benefit and want to benefit from that. That we could talk about the pros and cons of that. But really the industry, both the act of needing these things to fall off the factory floor has been exacerbated by the hobby and these big tentpole films that just eat more and more of our lifestyle. So it's got a lot of cachet, a lot of internet value, a lot of probably physical value, and a lot of click value. Mm-hmm. So it's worth it. It's definitely worth it, I guess, for those people. Now there's the debate of what's it ruining. What's it to us? What's the pros? What's the cons in that regard?
I get that all the time.
It's one thing to give Hasbro a middle finger, like they're
a $1 million company. What does it matter to them?
Yeah.
I get that all the time.
It reflects poorly. On one side, it can reflect poorly on the company. Reflects just as badly on Mattel when something they make leaks. I'm not going to pick on Hasbro or it all happens. It happens to everybody. One little aside, this is probably a little inside baseball, but at this point, who cares? One of the early Ice Giants toys got released back in Thor, the very first Thor. And I don't know if someone could go back in time and find that thing on the interwebs that was originally released, but that they were so upset that it was released that they changed the look of the ice giants in that movie just to make Hasbro do more work, because they were upset that a toy
really
got
interesting
released. It got very petty, is what I remember.
I did not know that.
It's a very odd story to tell. It's not necessarily my story to tell because I didn't do Mattel product or Marvel product, but when some of the stuff gets released early, it really can piss the wrong person off, or just give them the reason to have a bad day. There was a beach towel that had some style guide Transformers art that got released in Germany around movie 1.
Yep.
1 or 2.
I
one
remember
of the very
that.
first thing.
That was the very first.
You would have thought.
Look of it, yeah. I remember that beach towel.
Yeah, you would have thought Michael Bay, like, we ruined the movie, and he blamed me. I remember him saying, "Well, you guys wouldn't let that beach towel get released." I mean, and I remember saying to him, "How could I possibly stop that, Michael?" Because he put it on me directly, and I don't tell that story too often, but I kind of said, "You can't put that on me directly." They're no longer a partner. That's how that's dealt with. They're not going to make any money. So anyway, these things go way back. People. It's not just prototype samples that are pan painted and whatever. It can be any part of the thing early has cachet and value somewhere down the line.
I just remember that beach. Yeah. See, and again, that's the thing is that.
So yeah, I had a whole days of discussion about that damn beach towel. You guys would have no idea.
I just remember that was because how it was essentially was, as fans, we first saw the very first, I guess we'll call it that early art with the gray background, where everyone was criticizing how Megatron looked. And that was like early stuff, and a lot of people were going like, "Oh, well, that's early design stuff. It gets cleaned up and looks better later on." And then I remember that beach towel. When that beach towel went out, that's based off of control art, which is stuff that was going to be on, binders and posters and the side of a water bottle and all that kind of licensing stuff that you guys would have done, after for the movie.
Yeah.
And that was our first time we ever saw Optimus more or less how he was going to look in the movie. Obviously, little tweaks here and there from the final. What was it? Whatever was it? ILM, whoever did the CG.
Yeah.
The little tweaks that they would do to the final model. But I mean, still at that time, that was a big deal for us. And again, it got you in trouble with Mr. Bay. So
I just had to take,
a chewing.
He was. Yeah, I mean, hey, again, if you're in the direction of fire, you're going to get shot.
Yeah, of course.
I was just there that day. He was upset about that, and that's how it goes.
Yeah, but and again, I've tried to explain to people, and I did a segment about this on the podcast in the past, where a lot of people would always ask me again, like, how does it affect you? Like, what, all that matters in the end is we as the fans get to see the toys first. Like, we get to see it early, so, shouldn't you just be excited and just let that be? What is it? What is it to you? And I had to explain to people there's a lot of factors. There's a lot of stuff that just, get messed up by that toy theft process and stuff getting leaked out early. Yeah, it benefits it, and especially at the end of the day, it benefits us from a visual standpoint. We get to see the product and get to know a little bit more of it in advance. And it benefits monetarily, usually the person who's showing it off, because 9 times out of 10, it's not a guy showing it off on a message board for free, or posting it on Twitter or something where there's no way to monetize it. Most of the time, it's done through YouTube, or it's done through a website through the owner that has ads on that website and gets traffic and click traffic and stuff like that. So there's a monetary benefit for them to get that information or that product early, or that shot. So it's something that people need to understand, that people's jobs get put at risk, contracts get put at risk. Hasbro, when it comes from trademarking and licensing, that gets put at risk. There's a lot of different
Yeah,
levels.
no, I mean, I definitely seen, from internal guys literally lose their job for releasing photos of things to friends of theirs on, and want to make it online or whatever. So that's tragic. Um, and then, I've seen factory guys, same deal. And it's crazy. It's crazy.
And well, and from my perspective, like I know that within the Transformer fandom, like it really started to pick up. Like my earliest memory of Transformer stuff leaking out, the very first memory that I have of it was BotCon 2001. They had a exclusive, which was a white Beast Wars Ravage into Tigatron. That was one of their exclusives, and it leaked onto eBay. And for a lot of us, when we first saw it, we didn't know what this was. We're like, oh, it's a white Ravage X9 from Beast Wars. Is this a prototype? Because it was all white, but it has like these blue accents on it, which would not be something, that were painted, which would not be something of a prototype. So we didn't know what was going on. And then, later on we learn that it's the BotCon exclusive Beast Wars Tigatron figure. And that was the first example of that. Someone leaked it online, sold it for a good chunk of money, made profit. It was clearly something that came from a factory, but it was BotCon, and it was kind of a different animal. But then it really picked up when it was Revenge of the Fallen. And Revenge of the Fallen was, here's the Transformer movies. Now they've proven themselves. They're a big market. They have all this attention. Revenge of the Fallen, I still say to this day, really was the peak for Transformers. It was when the whole world was looking and paying attention. And because
yeah.
Well, if you can say something.
No, I just agree. Yeah.
And
that brought in a whole new audience, or a dormant audience into all of that.
2009 really was like, that's when, people that I knew my whole lives that just had no interest at all in this brand were now like buying figures, who were just like straight up, they were a D&D guy, or they were, a Star Wars guy, or they were a Marvel guy. And here they are now going like, oh, that Optimus, that looks pretty cool. And it's like, oh, where were you for the past 30 years, So, you could say what you want about the movies themselves, but it brought attention to it, but not just on a small level, on a major level in terms of traffic and what people are looking for to watch. And that's when it really, like, I to me, 2008, 2009 was the start of YouTube and people really starting to do toy reviews. And if you had a really good audience, you were making money. Yeah. I kind of got out of the YouTube toy review thing years ago, but at its peak, I was making between $700 and $1,000 American a month, because it was just so busy in 2009, 2010, 2011. It was ridiculous how many people wanted to look at Transformer product on YouTube. That was like the peak time, the peak interest for a lot of people. And then, of course, when Transformers Prime came out, which would be like that first series after Revenge of the Fallen, that first new fresh series, it really even increased that even more, because now here was something that was very movie-esque, but on television. So what I'm trying to come around back to here is in 2009, that's when the toy theft thing, I feel, really went into high gear. And I'm not going to name names, but, and please, people in the chat, don't name names too. I'm not here to call out anybody. But, those individuals, they practically made entire careers for themselves that still exist to this very day by stolen product. Because, and I'm not trying to, take apart, their quality of their content, but what really gave the spotlight on them and brought people to their channels and stuff and said, hey, look at this guy, look at that guy. Because the reality is there's millions of YouTube videos uploaded every day. Millions of channels are created. Millions of people, do stuff. What separates one person from the next when you have new product? And it's not just Transformers. If you're someone that has the latest iPhone 4 months before it's supposed to come out publicly at your iPhone store, you got a 5 million view video right there in your hand. Like, and there's a monetary value to that. When you go, oh, I have the newest iPhone 4 months before everyone else. What does it matter if I just go on YouTube and start talking about it? Easily 5 million people are going to watch that video, and you're going to make some money. And so there's a quantifiable value that ends up being associated with anything that's new. But when you make it something that's new that you have that the rest of the world in general doesn't, you stand the profit from it. So you open up a YouTube channel, you talk about the toy, and people rush in, and then you end up building an audience based off of the stolen goods. It's kind of like imagine if Walmart didn't start out as just a company that was selling, cheap stuff and cheap prices and everything, but they made money because they ended up getting all this stuff in advance before everyone else. So they became the one-stop shop for everyone to see stuff before everyone else did and buy stuff before everyone else did. So that was their hook. And a lot of these guys to this day, they make because then you create this built-in audience, you get all these subscribers, you get all these viewers. And then now that you have this built-in audience that you built on stolen goods, now once in a while you could go out and, go to Toys R Us or Walmart or wherever, or Target, depending on where you are in the world, and buy a slightly older product and review it because you already have a built-in audience. So, obviously you're not going to make as much as that advanced product, but you're going to have that built-in audience that still will watch. So it became this rat race, and obviously the factory workers knew that because at the time in 2009, Transformers were exclusively more or less made in China and Japan. Vietnam wasn't a factor just yet. And the factory workers knew that. And it was crazy what was going on because you were having Transformers animated toys that would be coming out, they'd be reviewed a year before they even hit shelves. And you would find out that the reviewer would sometimes pay 3, 4, 5, 6 times what its MSRP value would have been just to review it first. And I'll tell you this right now, as someone who did YouTube reviews, one video is not going to make you, I don't care how much views you get, it's not going to make you $300, one single video. But yet they'd be spending $300, $400 on a single product stolen from the factory just to get it first. Because they knew the long-term repercussions of it, which would be you'd get this new audience and they'd come back to watch all your videos, your backlog, your content. So that was like again, I didn't want to go off too much on that, but that was kind of the driving force in 2009 when so much stuff was getting stolen. And it was if I had to make a list of just all, just off the top of my head, just all the early Revenge of the Fallen scouts and animated toys and Prime toys that were disappearing from factories and showing up on YouTube. And we're talking seeing it for the first time ever on YouTube, not from BotCon, not from a Hasbro press release, not from Go ahead.
That's what I would say is these things are always trend based, right? So it was Star Wars when episode 1 and 2 and everything was huge and very, what's going to happen? What's the next series? It wasn't until after that first movie that so many people wanted to be first or be part of it. And that many more people, right, came into the hobby and with videos and everything else. So we weren't prepared because Transformers had never been, kind of that kind of collector thing. I would say the guys that collect the prototypes and the first shots are still a bit of an outlier in Transformers.
Oh, they are, for sure. For sure.
Yeah, it's its own little subset hobby. But once it got big, like you said, around Revenge of the Fallen, anything rare and unique was desirable, right? From any more new people.
Well,
on top of that,
from
so
what I saw
was the thing to get early, get whatever.
Well, what I saw especially was the guys, like I said before, that were just Star Wars fans. But those guys, and then you bring in the guys that were speculators. You took the guys that were from the sports card world, where that collapsed in the early 90s. the comic book world that collapsed in the mid 90s, and then they started emigrating into the toy world, mostly because of Beanie Babies started interest in investing, and we all know how that worked out.
Yeah. Starting lineup.
Yeah, starting lineup. Yeah, well, starting lineup was the sports card world and the video game world merging together. Sports card world and the toy world merging together, and trying to find a place to make money. But all those speculator guys came in, and then when all of a sudden here's Transformers that barely would get any kind of coverage in Toy Fair magazine, and here it is now front and center. And I used to read Toy Fair magazine since its inception, and I used to always point out, wow, there's just not a lot of Transformer stuff in here. A lot of Star Wars, a lot of Mego. Man, did they love
they were superhero nerds.
Yeah, they loved Mego. Like, Mego hadn't been produced for like 20 years, and here they're still talking about Mego. So I used to always be, baffled by that. But man, when that first movie came out, all of a sudden it's on the front page, and now they're talking about it all the time, and they're doing their little Mego theater jokes involving Transformer toys. And that showed to me now that whole market and the speculators within that market, because those speculators, they were focusing on Star Wars toys. Oh, that first run Kenner Leia, she's one per case with Lando Calrissian, so, you got to speculate on those because those are going to be worth money. And it created that whole market, but those guys never were really in the Transformer world. It's crazy as it sounds. Yeah. You open up an old Lee's Action Figures magazine or Toy Fair, and you go straight to the Transformer G1 section. Oh, how much is a complete G1 Jetfire? And you're like, what, $25 back in 1999? Where today he would be like a $200 item in perfect condition. So it completely shifted. All of a sudden there's first of all, number one, you put more buyers into a market, everything goes up because of demand, that's just 101 speculation and investing and collecting, especially when you have only a finite amount of G1 toys in existence. And even if there was a lot, there still is only a finite amount of them.
Yep.
And then you bring in this speculator market that starts looking at the prototypes, that starts looking at stuff, because they're looking for the next way to make money. They're looking for, well, what's going to be valuable in this hobby? You have to understand. Well,
it's always the. Sorry.
Go ahead. No, I want to hear your take on it.
Well, it's I don't know if I'm going to the same place though, but
go ahead.
It's a bit of the pinnacle of the hobby, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you can get something that is a one of a kind, 10 of a kind, 100 of a kind, purposefully or uniquely colored in a way that belies the core character's actual colors. It's unique and it's a trophy, right? You can't buy it. It has to. You can buy it, but most people can't buy it. And it's, so to me, those are like advanced collector and or enthusiast kind of totems, right?
Yep.
I can't, anybody can get the rare box set something or other if they, go to the right website, or get in on that Hasbro Pulse item, but only one of these exists theoretically. And that's always going to have cachet. That's the way of the world. No doubt about that. So that's why that exists.
Well, and especially when, just a few years prior, here's the Home Shopping Network selling us on Beanie Babies and how these are investable and they're going to be worth tons of money later and you could retire on it. And some of the people who didn't learn how that story ended, they assumed, oh, well, I guess Maple Bear is going to be worth $400 in 5 years from now. And, that world transferred over to Transformers, and they were looking for anything that they could find, but it became more of a short-term thing. It became get those early toys first and then sell them quickly to a market that just can't wait. We've had that discussion before where people just can't wait, they gotta buy it now.
Yeah. And we are, I'm conflating a lot of different issues, right? There are prototypes that are, handmade something or others. There's first shots that are plastic, whatever. Then there's just the the first to market, first to photograph kind of actual toys. That has cachet if Hasbro hasn't released official photos yet. So we're conflating all these types of things into one big bucket of, things that shouldn't be released to get released in a way, just so everybody understands that. I think the rarity of some of these things are higher on the, obviously the prototype side than they are just getting that early photo a month and a half before everybody else. But like you said, or like I would say, there's a downstream effect to somebody. There's a director somewhere upset. There's a marketing manager somewhere upset. There used to be magazine editors or maybe website partners now that are going to miss out on an opportunity to debut something cool.
Well, what was happening even as of recently was, Hasbro Pulse, they have a YouTube channel. They obviously have advertisers that work on those YouTube channels. They probably have deals with Google where they go, hey, we have our channel. We're going to be debuting some stuff through a stream. And obviously there's going to have ads running on those streams, which is monetary gain for them and everything else. And what's the point when all of a sudden everything that they were going to reveal in that stream got leaked out 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks before because it got stolen by people,
Yeah.
and then ended up in YouTube reviewers' hands and on websites and stuff like that. So,
well, I hope that, Hasbro's always going to be able to give the official message, even if it is 3 weeks later, so you can hopefully, always, it's going to be a better source. But it does take away part of the enterprise, and that enterprise is what makes all things flow. So there is not unlike the third-party stuff that I've talked about in the past, there is a point where, if there's no, I don't know how to say it exactly, but you want the marketing campaigns to work so that they can work. And if they don't work, you're not going to invest in future marketing campaigns. And then the thing just starts to atrophy a little bit.
Well, not to mention
that's a sensational way to say it, but ultimately that's kind of what starts to happen.
Well, not to mention
you
also
get gun shy
in a world today where, we're not revealing stuff at conventions. We don't have a San Diego Comic-Con that we could have a huge booth and, 40,000 people who aren't Transformer fans walk by that booth and discover that product for the first time. So we lean more now on a much more direct market. If people are tuning into that Hasbro Pulse stream, it's probably because they're already a Transformer fan. It leans more on that, unfortunately, than revealing something for the first time at San Diego Comic-Con or New York Comic-Con, and the guy who discovers your product for the first time was an Iron Man fan who went to San Diego Comic-Con. So because you lose that already in the current market we're in right now, and it makes it very difficult, because if those other individuals get that product before you, you can't even control how the world learns about it first, because it gets out there. And worst case scenario, they get a test shot that's not even a proper representation of the product properly. It's damaged, missing a piece, who knows what. That's the worst case.
Yeah, but I don't. On another side of it, I would say maybe we're not going to be able. You're not going to kid a kidder anyway. Most people know they're looking at stuff that fell off a truck that may be transformed correctly, maybe isn't. Might look different once the real deco's on it or the full deco's on it. So sometimes it is kind of like, well, yeah, you can see that now, but it's kind of like looking at a sketch. Why don't you wait 3 weeks and see it at BotCon, or see it on that Pulse night or whatever? Because it's going to be the more official, literal way to do it. But
totally,
just like with movie trailers and everything else, I would rather watch a very dodgy, dirty Dune trailer just to see what's happening than wait for the official one that's going to come out 14 hours later, So I get it. I do get it. But I also think that when we're talking about this hobby and its very dedicated fan base, we sometimes forget that it's only a sliver of the overall engaged fan base.
Yeah.
That probably doesn't really listen to a lot of these kinds of in-depth videos and talking about 20 or 30 or 40-year-old things the way we do.
Yeah.
And are probably going to that Hasbro Pulse stuff or whatever for more of the literal commercial that it is, the promotional opportunity. Oh, I want to learn more about this. Oh, that looks cool. And they're probably not really missing, or they've already missed the spoiler in a way.
Oh yeah, I hope so.
We're just hyperactive on in the hobby, so for us, spoilers are more acute, I guess.
Plentiful, especially. Yeah. No,
but for the normal person, they're probably not getting spoiled as much as we are.
And we have a pretty crazy fan base. I will say that. Like, it's, you know, I wear different hats in this world. I'm part of like different parts of fan bases and video games and stuff like that. And the Transformer fan base definitely is probably one of the most vocal. That's for sure. Of what they want and what they want to see. That's for sure.
Well, they know their stuff. It's one of the longer ones that's been intertwined with toy and entertainment. You know, you could have read Batman for 50 years before there was a toy line. You know,
Mm-hmm.
So it's just different, and it's been a fun group to be connected to. You know, I worked on a lot of toy lines. I don't talk about a lot of the toy lines because the fan base isn't fun to talk to or about.
They're not as interested in the creative part.
Yeah, I wouldn't do this if I didn't like the conversation that I have with you and others, and that we have overall at conventions and other things. It's an intelligent, educated group that can have conversations about the nature of change and the pros and cons of all of it, and in-depth character analysis. And it's an interesting group on top of the technological and puzzle-based types that it attracts.
Totally. So right now we're at 10:50 Eastern Standard Time. We've been going for about an hour right now. Do you want to maybe open it up to some questions from?
Yeah, did we hit all? I think we hit all the major
more
points
or less
there. I mean,
more or less,
without getting into the the dire crap. But yeah.
So if you guys have any questions, obviously we have a little bit of a delay, so we won't see the questions right away. But if you have any questions for Mr. Archer, be sure to ask. Might as well plug your stuff while we wait. So obviously, if you want to see any of his art and his creations, follow him on Instagram, ArcherMonster_creative. He posts a lot of his hand-painted and hand-colored art and stuff like that. You'll see a lot of Transformer stuff, as well as, what was the last one? You posted some Batman stuff recently, I saw.
Yeah, I do. I'll post my old presentation boards and things.
That's what it was, eh? Because I was like, that look like from Dark Knight or something.
Yeah, it goes way back that way.
And then, of course, also archermonster.com, his official website. You're also selling art, too, correct? Let me know about that.
Yeah, I sell art on archermonster.com, but
I'll show some examples.
All the art that you see on all the stuff you see on Instagram is usually stuff I would have had available at conventions and stuff throughout the year, and we've been in the year we've had.
Yeah.
And so if anybody sees anything cool up there and wants to hit me up, please do.
Give an example of some stuff he sells at cons. So here's like a Rodimus that he did me years ago. Had a little certificate on the back there, and then a Cthulhu. So all kinds of nice little stuff. Okay, so we have some whole bunch of questions piling in. If I miss anything, guys, just repeat them again. Hey Aaron, why didn't a few Armada figures have show accurate colors like Wheeljack and Tidal Wave? So what he's referring to is Tidal Wave's figure. Initially, at least in America, not the Japanese version, had like a green kind of color scheme. while the Japanese version had the show accurate purple. And in the case of
Yep.
Wheeljack, what he's referring to is, I believe it was the blue stripes against the yellow stripes, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so Tidal Wave was one of the few colors in the series that I was asked to change because we had a lot of purple characters. Galvatron was coming out. I think we had Sideways. So anyway, there are a lot of purple villains, and we did not have a lot of green in the line. So that's one of the concessions you end up having to think about.
I always hear that.
The rainbow on the shelf. And so, and the battleship nature of what that vehicle was going to maybe look like in package, it would look better as something green, I guess. So that's why it got changed, and it got changed late enough on our side that the animation was already underway. And Tagara was like, "Well, that's up to you," and that's how we went.
So what you're trying to say is that there, in some cases, chances are, if the animations, I believe it was Zebek that did Armada, and Micron, they probably, if they would have known that this change was being made, Tidal Wave probably would have ended up being green in the end, in the show, or
had we been able to get to the schedule.
Okay, cool.
Everything has a drop dead date kind of thing on the animation delivery, so you could change anything a couple times before that date, if and so there are. So I think if I add to your question a little bit, your inquisitive nature on it, there are any number of characters that to be the colors you know them as that weren't started that way.
Yeah.
But you just never saw those colors. So Tidal Wave is one of the few that we didn't catch, and you saw how we changed it.
We have a super chat question. Thank you, Jack, for the donation. Why do you think that Hasbro has been hesitant on releasing more video games akin to the War for Cybertron and Devastation? They've been a well-received and new game as such, as iPhones or iPhone apps don't have that good feel, unfortunately. That's just more a matter of, like, the monster, and you were working on that stuff, especially back then. The monster that was the War for Cybertron project, I guess we'll call it, was more than just a little video game, but that was like opening up to a whole world you guys were creating back then. Like, that was, I mean,
yeah. Well, I mean, I'll again, I like to take a step back. Why were we there in the first place? Mm-hmm. Having a A+, whatever, AAA, whatever they used to call
AAA game.
A proper game, right? What is the knock on every licensed game or every movie related game? They stink, right? They're not. They were rushed out. And they don't match the thing. And, Yep. So what could be done if you spent the same amount of time on a licensed game like a Transformers that had some meat that you could put to it, that you would a Call of Duty or some other type game like that. So that was the initial thing, why we went into that. And those games, they take a lot of effort. It costs a lot of money.
Yep.
And quite honestly, to add the license on top of that, it's just not worth it for some of these companies. As much as Hasbro might want to do that, I don't know if it's a Hasbro decision, an Activision decision.
Well, especially
whatever.
I've covered this in the past because
it costs a lot. Yeah, we talked about it. It costs a ton of money, and you're spending a lot of money to even get that mark now.
Well, and not to mention High Moon Studio, which was the guys that you were working with for War for Cybertron. It also, in a lot of ways, was their undoing, because after they finished with Transformers, they would go on to do a Deadpool game, and that Deadpool game cost them so much money, and it didn't work out in the end, that they went belly up, and that was the end of them. And so it worked out great for them with Transformers, but all it took for them was one bad game, and that was the end of it. So when you're a video game company and you see what happened to High Moon, where it's like, wow, they had great success with these Transformer games, and then they did one bad misstep with a license, which in this case it was the X-Men and Deadpool, and that was the end of them. Jobs were lost, company went under. So what do you do when you see all that effort put in and doesn't pay off? Well, you're going to make those cheapy cell phone games instead that have less risk. And sometimes, especially in this day and age of how cell phone games work, way more budgetary payoff. Way more with the pay-to-win system.
And I mean, when it comes to those games and any of those different partnerships, whether it's mobile, console, handheld even, retro, you know, they're revenue generating. They're an extra awesome bit in totally different categories that Hasbro's in. It's not, you know, the market is already flowing. You just want to be part of that market.
Yep.
You're not trying to reinvent the market or be the best in the market.
You're trying to do what has worked in that market before and try to get a little piece of that. Yeah.
Or these companies come to Hasbro and say, hey, we've already dominate this market with your mark on it. It'll be even better. You know, sometimes they try things like Angry Birds, Transformers, and try to blend worlds for the betterment of each.
Again, they tried a cell phone game, a toy line, a comic book. You know, there was a little mix of everything there to try to create something. In the long term, in the long term, it didn't really work, but they tried. You know, they said, Angry Birds is this, you know, worldwide success, and we could get a piece of that and put the Transformers brand attached to it. Why the F not? You know, like, let's see what happens. You know, if you get a little bit of that sprinkle on there, because the reality is, as big as Transformers was when Angry Birds was out, Angry Birds was just this monster on the mobile world. So if you could get a little bit of Angry Birds sprinkle, get some of their fan base looking at Transformer toys in a huge decline of children touching toys but are stuck on mobile, you know, that's a smart move. Did it work out in the end?
Yeah.
That's debatable, but at least it was something that they tried. Transformer 2002 asked, Aaron, what was the first ever Transformer figure you received? I guess maybe from Hasbro.
No,
probably at the time, Kenner. No, it would be Hasbro. It would be Hasbro. Yeah.
Like received.
I guess maybe
as a kid, I got Optimus.
Okay, there you go. So I guess the first Transformer you ever got, period. Yeah, as a kid.
Yeah. Old school styrofoam Optimus Prime.
There you go. Yep. 1984 pre-rub Optimus Prime.
Yes. Yes.
Let's see. Where's the next one here? What does Mr. Archer think of the War for Cybertron trilogy thus far?
I haven't kept up with too much of it. I'm looking forward to the Beast stuff. We'll see how that Kingdom stuff goes. Just because, as I said before, I was part of the team that brought back vehicles after Beast machines, like real vehicles with car robots, and throughout everything else we did. Mm-hmm. And I've been waiting for the day that Beasts come back in a serious way. And so I'm just looking forward to that.
It's a big it's a big concentrated effort, I'll tell you. I was even like when you look at the packaging, there clearly is an effort this time around. Because I'll tell you, those past two series is, you know, I'm not going to rag on the packaging, but they were uniform, I guess is the best way to put it, where there was no risks this time around. But with the Beast Wars ones, it was...
Yeah. A lot of Transformers packaging seems kind of in the same family look, no matter what it is these days, to me, anyway. So I don't know. I wish I had a better answer.
No problem.
But I don't keep up on all the series as much as you guys do. I keep up in general what's happening, but I don't always.
You peek in once in a while, see what's happening.
Yeah.
Ninjatron wants to know, Aaron, if you were to hazard a guess, how much ninja power is Dan worth? I don't even know what he means by that, but
100 ninja power.
Oh, is it? I don't even know what that is. I was hoping over 9,000, but that would be a Dragon Ball reference. Was there ever plans to take the Dreamwave G.I. Joe Transformers World War II designs and turn those into toys? So when you guys had Dreamwave Comics back in the early 2000s.
No.
Okay.
Those comics involved, the pros and cons of World War II, and we didn't want to trade on that in any way.
You probably answered this before, so apologies if this is a repeat. What was the first Transmetal 2 design you worked on, and how did you find that experience shifting to transforming toys?
Well, my first several